Elementor is a powerful page builder that allows you to lay out beautiful pages with just one click of a button. So such a powerful tool must cost a fortune, right? So Elementor has a free packet, and also it has prices starting from $49 a year. So really it is very affordable. With a lot of what we're going to be building throughout this course, you can actually use just the free Elementor package. So Elementor boasts that it can be linked with any WordPress theme, which is quite impressive seeing how many there are out there. But as you know, for this course, we're using Ocean WP. So we know for a fact that 100% works with Elementor. Elementor has its own holy trinity, which consists of sections, columns, and widgets. Sections and columns are basically containers, whereas widgets are the features or the elements that you put on the page. So let's look at how they interact together. Imagine your website like a table in a bakery. And on this table, it is full of cakes from one end to the other. The table, in essence, is your browser window, and the cakes are displayed on cake stands. So let's zoom in a little bit and look at that. So we've just said that the browser is the table. The cake stand is actually the section. The cake, imagine the cake as a column, and the icing on the top of the cake, imagine that as the widget. Now, from this analogy, we can look at each individual section and see that as you start from the bottom and work your way up, so you go from the table to the cake stand to the cake to the icing, that these elements get progressively smaller. Now, we can also see that these elements are stacked on top of each other. So you can't have a widget without a column, and you can't have a column without a section, and you can't have a section without a browser or the table. Just in the same way, you can't have a cake icing without the cake, because it would just be a puddle of icing on the cake stand. So if you think about it like that, it helps you visualize where we're trying to come from. So just like a cake on a cake stand, each of these elements have their very own properties. So let's look at each one individually. The section is a container which holds columns. Now, each section runs horizontally across your browser page, and they can be stacked on top of each other. Depending on your page settings, they actually go from one end of the page to the other. So we just mentioned columns. So columns are also a container, and they help you contain widgets. Now, columns work slightly different. So instead of sections that are stacked on top of each other, columns, you can place a column within a section, and you can divide it, just like with a cake, into different columns. So you can actually take one column and divide it into, say, 6 pieces or 6 columns. Now, inside those columns, we place widgets. Now, widgets, similar to sections, can only be stacked on top of each other. It sounds very simple, and with some really creative thinking, you can actually lay it out in a very complex way. So these are the fundamentals that you need to consider before you start page building. Now, the best way to do that is actually to look online and see what other websites are doing that are similar to your industry. So for this example, we're going to look at PODTech's homepage. We're just going to look at the top section to simplify it. We can see from the screenshot that it appears to be one seamless block all the way across. Well, in fact, you can actually break this down into its properties. So we have the column on this side, and then we have another column on the far side. The far column actually contains a widget, which is an image. Now, that image is actually expanded as large as it can, and it fills up the entirety of that column. So let's look at the nearest column and see how that's been broken up, because there's a few little tricks that have been thrown in there. So on the offset, it does look very simple. We have one H1 title. Underneath that, we have a H2 title. And then underneath that, we actually have a paragraph with a text box. Now, we just mentioned before that we can only stack widgets on top of each other. But now if we look at the bottom part of the section, we actually have a button on your left and then some text on your right. So let's look at how we've achieved that, because as we've just mentioned, we know we can't join the widgets together. So in this part of the page, we've actually used something called an inner section. Now, the inner section actually almost acts like a column itself, and you create a small section within that column. An inner section is classified as a widget, even though it has properties very similar to a column. So what we did was we created an inner section at the bottom of this column, and we added a button to your left and text to your right. So as you can see, once you start breaking different sections of websites down, you can very quickly build up complex structures and create something that's a lot more visually interesting. So let's dive back into Elementor and actually look at how this is broken up now. Okay, so we're in the back office now of Elementor, and we've just quickly discussed how this was laid out. So as mentioned, we've got one section and we have two columns here like this. Inside the column on the right, we just have one image. And inside the column on the left, we have the title widget, we have another title widget, we have a paragraph widget, we have the inner section editor, and then inside that we have one button and another title here. So that's how this section is laid out. As you can see, when you break it down like that, it is quite simple. The best way to build websites is to actually sketch out, or if you got Photoshop or Illustrator, lay out the pages that you want to build first. Then you can look at it and go, right, I'm going to need to create 2 columns for this with widgets, or I need 3 columns for this section. And once you've got a clear indication of how you're going to build that section in your mind, then you should start going forwards. If you just dive in and start building willy-nilly, it will actually take you longer because you'll be adjusting things and you won't know how it looks overall. So that's how the intersection works. We will go into this in a bit more detail later on in the course, but for now, this will give you a good indication. So that's the basics of Elementor, and now let's look at how to mount Elementor to a page, and then we're going to have a quick look at Elementor's editor sidebar to see how we can use that to manipulate different widgets like text or images. Now in the back office of my test WordPress website, and I'm going to quickly show you how to add a new page and then to mount Elementor to it. It's very simple and straightforward. So we want to come to Pages here on the left. And we can see there's some previous pages that we've made before. So we can either edit these or we can add a new one completely. The process is much of the same. So I'm going to add a new one for the sake of this tutorial. So let's add a new page. And I'm going to call this page Test. As previously mentioned before, we need to make the content layout 100% full width, and we need to remove the title. Once we've done all that, click Publish, Publish again, and now that page is live. So we're going to now mount Elementor to that page. So at the top you can see here it says Edit with Elementor. All you have to do is click that button, and then it will load and take you through to your Elementor page builder. As previously shown, you just search for your elements in the sidebar, and then you can drag them over like this. So create a test page now and just try dragging over some of these elements so you can see how it's been laid out. So now I'm going to jump over to PODTech's Elementor editor page, and we're going to talk to you a little bit more about this sidebar here. Now we're going to quickly look at the editor sidebar of Elementor. So for this, I'm going to show you, we're going to use this title as an example. So in the text editor sidebar here, we have 3 columns: content, style, and advanced. Content deals with what the element or what that section or what that column actually is. So for this example, it's text. For the example of this image here, it's the image itself. Now you can play around with its layout. You can change its priorities, and you can even add custom links there. That can be quite useful when you're using buttons. The content itself will have the link to the page you're wanting to link to. So next we have style, and as you can guess from style deals with the way that element looks. So we can change the color, we can change the font size, weight, or its typography. We can even change the line height and the letter spacing. And finally, in the advanced section, we can change things like the margin and the padding, and also whether we want it to be shown on desktop, tablet, or mobile. We'll go through in a bit more detail later on in the course of how to really lay out margin and padding on each individual element. So now let's look at how to add a new element. If you come to the 6 dots at the top and click it, you'll have a huge section here of elements that you can add. Now, some of them will be paid for features. So as you can see, they have a little lock here. But the ones that don't, you'll be able to drag over onto your desktop. So let's try adding an image. So select the image widget, drag it over, and let's quickly add that there like that. So that's how you add an element. Now let's look at the bottom bar. So there's a lot of different features in here. First, the navigator just helps you jump around from section to section. Say you're having trouble selecting a specific element or a specific widget, you can come into your navigator and select the relative one. Next, we'll look at responsive mode. So responsive mode is how it looks on tablet, mobile, or desktop. And once you click that, you can then toggle between them at the top here, like so. Again, we'll show you a bit more detail later on how to edit each one of these individually. We also have preview changes. So we've just made this change here. So let's see how it looks on the front end. You can click the preview changes icon, and that'll open a new tab and show you how it looks on the front end. Now, this won't actually publish it. So you can make lots of changes, see how it looks before you publish it. So your website that your clients are seeing or your visitors are seeing doesn't keep changing and looking weird. Then once you're happy with the changes, you can click update, and then that will force the front end to show a live version of the changes you've just made. Finally, we have history tool here. So say you make a mistake or delete something by accident, or like what we're about to do here, you've made a change, looked at it on the front end and gone, I quite liked it at how it was before. You can come back through here and you can change all your previous edits all the way back till you find the one that fits to how you liked it previously. It's worth bearing in mind, it will only go back as far as how long this editor window has been open. If you update it, close the window, and then come back into it later, those changes won't be there. So I want to set it back to how it was before. So I just come right back to the beginning and click editing started. Click update, and let's see how it looks now on the front end. There we are, all back to normal.